Hello, how are you? So this is the third and the last part of the Angular Customizable Dashboard series, in which we create this nice looking Angular material dashboard, which is also customizable by going in the settings, increasing the width. You can see that it increases the widths, the heights, and also the position of the widgets, and your whole CSS grid layout nicely animates to adjust the changes. Okay, so let's see where we left off previously. So we previously left off at this point where we had added the customization options here and the movement options here. Now next we need to add the delete option, which is a delete icon on the left side here, which is going to allow us to delete our widgets. So first for that, let's add our delete button. So let's go in our widget options panel, and in our widget options panel, and in the widget options panel, we are going to just copy this button here, and we're going to call this remove widget. Okay. And then in the icon, we're going to give as delete. In fact, let's call it remove widget button. Okay, and the click event handler we're going to remove for now. Let's position this first. So we're going to create a class for this. We're going to do remove widget, and the absolute position is going to be the same. The top is going to be 0, and we don't need any transform here because it's on the top left, and the left will also going to be 0. Okay, and also we want to give a text color to this so that we can change the icon color to make it more apparent that it is a delete button. And so we're going to give this style, this color to it, which is a red color, indicating that it's something to delete. Okay, so let's see how this looks. Okay, now when we go in our settings, we're going to see this nice delete button here. Okay, so how do we add the functionality for this? Let's go in our dashboard service and let's add a function called remove widget, and it's going to take in the ID of the widget. And what is it going to do? So here what we do is that we are just going to filter option of the array to return an array without that specific ID. We're going to set the added widgets to added widgets dot filter, and this filter will be on the basis of the ID here. So it's only going to return back the widgets which are not equals to this ID, which means that it's going to remove that ID. And because it's filter, it returns a new array. It will be immutable. So we don't need to use the spread operator and create a new array explicitly for this purpose. All right. So remove widget should work at this point. Let's go to our widget options again and let's link it up with our button here. So let's do click remove widget. In fact, store.remove widget, and here we're going to give data ID. Okay, so let's try this out and let's try deleting this. You can see only views are left. We can also delete the views one here, and then we can add both of them here, and then we can delete them here again. We can add this one again. Okay, so deletion works. Next, we're going to add a few more customization features. So we're going to customize the color of the widgets as well, because we want to show different styles of widgets on our dashboard. So how do we do that? So first of all, we're going to go in our dashboard model and we're going to add two values here. The first will be a background color. Now this background color is going to be a string and it's going to be optional. Then we have a color. Now this is going to be a string as well. This is going to represent the text color or the foreground color of the widget. All right. So we want all of the colors within the widget to inherit these colors. And how do we do that? Well, let's go into our widget itself and we're going to add some dynamic style bindings here to get these colors applied to this container, to the widget. All right. So first let's add the background color here. So we're going to do background color, and we want to assign it to data dot background color. And if in case there's no background color given here, we're going to assume that the background color is white. All right. Similarly, we're going to copy this and we're going to apply another color, and this will be the color property. This is going to be the color. And if there's no color applied, then we're going to assume that it's the inherit property. Now we do that because Angular material has some default styles as well. So we want the color to inherit from the default style as well, the color property itself. Okay, great. So now to test it out, let's go in our widgets definitions in our service and let us change the widget definitions a bit. So for the subscribers component, we would like our rows to be 1 and columns to be 1 as well. And for the background color, we would like this special dark green color which you had seen in the original demo. And for the color, I don't want it absolutely white, but I want it a bit grayish, light grayish, so white smoke looks nice. Okay, let's just copy the same thing in the views component as well, because it is also basically a statistics component, a small component that we would like to see. And let's save this. And now you can see that it doesn't get applied here because these are our old definitions of the widgets. We can delete them and we can add a new definition here. And when we add the new definition, you can see that our colors are getting applied here. One thing you'll notice is that the settings icon is not getting applied here. So the settings icon color needs to also use this color. So we're going to go back in our widget component here, and we also want to change or override the color of this settings button to mimic the color property that we get there. So we're gonna override the design token for this specific color, and that design token is m-icon button icon color, and this we want to be our data.color. Otherwise we want it to be inherit from the material color settings. Okay, and let's also do another thing, and let's copy these two and let's keep these in the added widgets so that we can test them out until we add the syncing part so that it makes it easier to work with. So if, for example, in the views component, for example, we change the background color to white and the color to black, we'll be able to see that it reflects those changes. And you can see that this widget is basically using our different colors theming, and this widget is using our different color themings. So just taking this chance, let's build upon these statistics widgets a bit more and add 2 more widgets so that we can have these widgets and we can see how it looks. So let's just add 2 more widgets here. First, we'll add the components for them. Let's add the component here. So ngGC, we're going to add them to pages, dashboard, widgets, and we're also going to add them to, let's call one of them watch time. We're going to make this flat as before. Okay, so you can see the widget has been added, and then the fourth one we are going to make it as revenue so that we can track the revenue of our channel and how much it's generating. Similar, so we have 4 widgets now, and let's just do the same here. So we're going to add 2 more widgets here, and here we're going to do 3 and 4. So this is going to be watch time, and we're going to import the watch time component here. The background color and everything remains the same. Similarly, for this one, we're going to make this revenue and the revenue component, and everything remains the same. Now we're just going to copy this here so that we can immediately see how they look like. Okay, let's save this. And now you can see that we have our 4 widgets here, which you saw in the original demo. Now let's add some HTML here so that we can see how this looks. So we're going to do subscribers. In the subscribers one, I'm just going to copy paste some of the things that I already have so that we can save some time. So we're going to just copy this and save this here. Now we need the matte icon here. We're using the arrow circle up matte icon. And the rest of the stuff is just simple HTML with some styles that I have added in styles.sass to show the statistics in a common way. And then we have the matte icon that we need to import, and this should be it. So let's save this. Now you can see our subscribers look nice here. There's just some space issue here. I think we need some spacing here. So let's also do margin top 8 here so that we can get some spacing. So yeah, so this looks nice. And you can see that you can also move it around here and there. And also we can build up the views and stuff as well. So let's just copy that here and we can change it up later when we need to. So here, let's say for arrow circle up, we can do check, and you can see that it has a different icon. In fact, check underscore circle was the more appropriate icon here. Yeah, so this looks nice. And similarly for watch time and for the other ones as well, I'm just going to copy the subscribers one. I'm not going to change it in much. Watch time. Copy this up. And of course, if you want, you can even further, make this reusable. So you can create a reusable stats widget and use that instead of copying it. But I've used it in a simple way. So I'm just going to copy everything. So you can see we have our 4 widgets now here. And you can change the size of them as well if you'd like to, just like this. And you can see how we have a different color theming than the white color theming that we had initially. Okay, so this looks good. Now let's move on to the more interesting part, and that is how to animate our grid. Now currently it works fine functionally, so you can see that it changes the size, it changes the position, but it's still, it's a grid and it should show the layout changes without any jerks and without any pauses, so it should nicely animate between the states. Now, so in order to add this feature, I researched a bit and I found out that you can use CSS transitions, and that was my first thing because CSS transitions is a more performant way of animating anything on the web. But the problem was, and if you look at this CSS animated grid layouts article on web.dev, they mentioned the grid template columns and the grid template rows. Now, these two properties of the CSS grid can be animated using CSS transitions. But the problem was that in our case, we needed to animate the grid row property and the grid column property, which we were basically using to change the sizes. And also for the movement, we were moving widgets here and there. So it didn't involve changing the grid template rows and grid template columns. So these were sort of the layout related animations. It was changing basically the layout of the CSS grid, and unfortunately that's not supported in CSS transitions. Now we have the concept of the view transition API, if you know that. So I have a separate video on that as well if you'd like to look at it. So the view transitions API is a sort of a way to animate such layout changes, and it is purely CSS as well, and we don't need any JavaScript for that purpose. But the problem is that it's not supported everywhere as yet. It's supported on Chrome very well, but it's not supported that well on Firefox and on even on Apple Safari. So the problem is that our grid won't be nicely animated. If I use that, our grid won't be nicely animated in those cases. So then I was left with JavaScript solutions for this purpose, and I came across this Animate CSS Grid package, which is a sort of a utility package created by Alex Holashe, who is a front-end developer. And it's really nice. It has got about 1400 stars here and been forked 60 or 70 times. And it solves this problem in a very elegant way, and that is by using the Mutation Observer API. So you can see the example here. You can animate the grid column and the grid row as well in this way. You can animate the grid template columns, which you can animate in any case, and you can also animate the grid gap in this way. So you can virtually animate any layout change, and how it does this is really interesting. They use the Mutation Observer API, which basically detects any DOM changes, and whenever those DOM changes happen, it's going to animate between those DOM changes for every element, and it uses the JavaScript library pop motion under the hood to animate it from one state to the other. Okay, and the result is a really nice looking animation like this. So I tried this out, and it turned out really well. So how to use that? So first of all, we need to install Animate CSS Grid. So we are going to do that here. We are going to do npm install Animate CSS Grid. Okay, and since we want to apply it to the dashboard grid, we can go to our dashboard component here, and you can see this dashboard widgets div is where we want to apply this. So it's really simple to apply. First, we'll need to get a reference to our containing div which contains all of the widgets and which applies the CSS grid specification. And then we're going to use the new signal based view child accessor function. So we're going to do here like dashboard is equals to view child dot required, and this is going to be element ref, and this is going to be accessed through the dashboard template variable. Okay, so we got the dashboard reference here. Now what we want to do is we want to just use the wrap grid function and specify this element, and then the animate grid package is going to handle everything else automatically. All right, so let's first import that from here, from animate CSS grid. Let's import the wrap grid function here. And where do we do that? We want to do that when the dashboard initializes. So we're going to use the lifecycle method ng on init. And here we're going to do wrapped. And the first is the container, which is our dashboard here. So it's a signal. So we're going to access the element ref and then the native element inside it. And then the second option is we can give some options as well. We just want to make the duration as 300 milliseconds because this seemed nicer to me in terms of the animation. All right. Okay. So let's try this out. Okay, and let's try changing the width, and now you can see that our dashboard has come to life and it's animating all of those changes. If you remove it, it's like we are just shuffling cards. It's so natural. We change the height, there's nothing here, so nothing is happening, but you can see everything is smooth here. All right, so this was simple and easy animations using the Animate CSS Grid. And if you have any other CSS grid, you can also animate it using this simple third-party package. There is just one thing that you need to be careful of, and we have already handled it in our code because I built it that way. But you need to ensure that all of the elements that you have within the dashboard widgets, they should have one containing div inside of them. So if we go to our widget, you're going to see that our widget has a container div here, which I specifically added for this purpose. Initially, I did not use this div, I was adding everything to the host, but I needed to add this div because the Animate CSS grid package adds a sort of a counter styling to it to make this work, to make the animations work. And when I did not add the div, the containing div, there was no animation that was applied. So you need to have a single containing div inside of the grid item that you have. All right. So you just need to make sure of that, and everything else will work as fine as it is now. All right. So now the next thing, and which is the last change that we'll do, is the local storage syncing. And you can see that how inconvenient at this point it is to just copy things in the added widgets structure here, because we can't really remember the layout that we have made, and we'll have to add all of the widgets again and again. So let's just remove this now because we won't need it anymore. And now to sync this, first let's add the saving part. That is, we are going to save the added widgets whenever we add them to the local storage. So how do we do that? We can create an effect for this purpose. If you don't know effects, they are part of the signals API, and effects are basically meant to run as soon as a signal value changes. Okay, so it automatically detects whether that signal value has changed, and it runs that effect. Okay, so in this case, we are going to do save widgets. We're going to create this effect. We're going to get this widgets here, and we're going to do this dot added. Now, as soon as we do this dot added widgets, we are using this signal inside of this effect, and that means the effect is going to run whenever the added widgets change. Okay, so that would be whenever we add or remove widgets, or even if we change, any sort of width or height or any configuration, any position. Since we're using immutable updates, it's going to change the added widgets, and it's going to trigger this effect. So we can be rest assured that all of our changes to the widgets structure, to the widgets styles, are going to be reflected or be going to be promptly saved in the local storage. But we need to add some handling here, some extra handling here, and that is because our widgets contain the content here as well. Okay, now the content contains the component, and this is sort of a component type. Now we can't really save this or stringify this because first of all, it will be a bit bigger than a normal value and we don't need it, and secondly, we might also run into cyclic errors because the JSON.stringify function is not going to work, which we need to save in local storage. So we need to strip out the components here. So instead of widgets, we're going to call this widgets without content, and we're going to map these widgets to copies of this widget like this, and then we're going to loop through these widgets without content for each, and then we're going to delete w.content here. All right. Now, in order for this to work, we also need to change the type to partial of widget, partial widget and array, because we want to remove the content here. Okay, and now delete w.content is not going to give an issue because we're going to remove the content from a partial object, which is completely possible. Okay, and then the last thing, we're just gonna set it in local storage. I'm gonna set the item. Let's give a name of dashboard widgets. You can keep this anything you want, and you're just gonna stringify the widgets without content here. All right. So now when we change any of the widgets, we add widgets, delete widgets, it's all going to be reflected in the local storage. Now let's not test it at this point. Let's test it at one time when we also add the fetch widgets function. So let's add that fetch widgets function as well. Let's add this here, fetch widgets. Now this function is going to do the inverse of what we just did. So we're just going to get the widgets as a string first. So let's get these widgets as a string, constant widgets as a string, and let's do local storage dot get item. We're gonna use the same, and then if the widgets as string is there, because it can also be initially that you don't have any local storage here, so nothing should happen in that case. So if it is there, then we are gonna get the widgets by parsing the string widgets as string, and we're gonna cast this as an array of widget, and then for each of them we need to get the content and assign it to that, so that our content can be displayed on the screen. So widgets dot for each widget, we want to get the content. We will get it from the originals widgets list which we have, and w.id is equals to, sorry, we have two w's, so we need to make this as widget, I guess. Then we're going to do widget.id, and then we're getting the content of this, and if we get this content, that means there is some content for this specific widget. We are going to assign this to the widget itself. So this will be the content. Okay, and then lastly, we are going to assign the widgets to our added widgets. Dot set is widgets. Okay. Now fetch widgets function has been added, but where do we call this? Now a good place to call this is to, in fact, let's just bring this down and let's just keep this close to the constructor, and we'll need to call this in the constructor. Now this constructor will be called when this service is going to be initialized, and this is going to be initialized when, since you're providing it in the dashboard component, it's going to be initialized as soon as the dashboard component is rendered or initialized. So this is exactly when we want to load our widgets from the local storage, all right? Okay, so let's save this and let's test this out. And now you can see I already had some things saved here. So I'm just going to remove them because they were of different IDs and stuff. So it's not showing up that well. And let's delete this and let's refresh this now. And now you can see that it's empty. And now we can add our widgets as it were. So we can add our subscribers, views, watch time, revenue, and it's animating nicely as we add these things through the animate CSS grid package. And now, if for example we delete this one and we try to refresh, you're going to see that. And even if you go to, for example, comments, we go to a separate this, we refresh it, analytics, content, we come back to dashboard here, you can see that our widgets have been saved in the local storage. Okay, great. So now we don't need to continuously hardcode some initial values to test things out. Okay, now notice that this is syncing just with local storage, but you can actually use the same function, the fetch function, and you can actually fetch it from your own server-side implementation. You can fetch it from a REST API. You can save this configuration information inside your Firebase, for example, Firestore storage as well. You can store it anywhere. And there are lots of opportunities and there are lots of possibilities with this approach. So for example, you can provide ready-made sort of layouts that you want, that you can provide to the users when they log in first time to your app. You can provide different kinds of dashboard layouts for different kinds of roles, for example. So for admins, you can provide a different set of widgets for widgets and layout configurations. And then for normal users, you can provide some different set of configurations. So all of this is going to help you. This whole structure is going to, you can further build upon this, and you can create all of these nice possibilities for your own projects and for your own complex apps, right? And of course, then when the users change their layouts, you can provide the options to save at any point, or automatically save this as they change it by sending an API call as well. Okay, great. So now let's complete this by adding us a different widget to a simple statistic widget, and we want to add a sort of a graph widget using chart.js. So let's see how we can add that, and it's going to complete this tutorial, and then you can add on more things as you would want it. I just wanted to show you an example of a chart because it's a very common element that we add to dashboards. Okay, so let's create a new component here and let's call this maybe analytics. All right, let's add this to our widgets list here. Let's copy this in and let's make this 5 and let's call this channel analytics, and then the content is going to be our analytics component. There are two analytics components, so let's add this one. And then we need about 2 rows for this. Okay, and we need about 2 columns for this initially because it's a big graph. And the background color and color we want to remove because you just want to use a default white background. All right, let's save this and let's see how this looks. So this looks pretty simple. Okay, let's add a revenue here as well. Okay, now let's add our chart.js. So let's go in our analytics, this one, and in our analytics, I'm just going to copy paste some stuff here. We have this template that we want to copy because we have a chart container which contains the canvas. So for that, first we need to import our chart.js, and we also need to install our chart.js. So npm install chart.js, and we can import chart.js from here, chart.js/auto, and this is going to be our chart. Now, if you'd like to, you can also encapsulate it in a separate standalone component and sort of create configurable options for that, inputs for that. It's your own choice, but I'm going to keep this simple. So we have the chart container and we are using this chart template variable so that we can access it and use it with the chart.js JavaScript function. So let's define a chart here. It's going to be a view child function here. We're going to make this required as well because it's always going to be there. And this is going to be an element as I specified before. We're going to call this chart. And then in on ng on init, let me just copy this code. It's going to just create a new chart here. Okay. All right. So we have a line chart here. and we have some data. It shows the sort of the progression of the views, and we have a border color, we have a background color, and we have a filling color, which how it actually fills up the chart area. And then this is an important thing, maintain aspect ratio property. This is by default true, but I've kept it as false because I want the layout to change based on the width and the height of the widget itself, not the chart itself. Otherwise it's going to go out of bounds of the widget and it doesn't look nice. And then another thing we want to do is this chart container, we want to add some styles to it. And for this chart container, we want to add the height to be about 100% minus 100 pixels. And this 100 pixels is basically the bottom, which is the button that we have here, the material raised button. So we want to minus that height, and then the width will be 100%. All right. And for the imports here, we want to import the matte button module because we're using the button here. All right. Great. So let's test this out. Let's save this. And now you can see this nicely animated chart.js component. Now you can use any charting component library. You can do ng2 charts maybe. That's also quite popular. But because our component can be anything that you need, we're not worried about our whole widget structure. We just need to change the content here. All right. So if you change the width here, you'll notice that it adjusts the size according to it. In fact, you can even make this smaller and you can see the graph adjusts according to it. So this was a nice thing that I took some time to figure out. And even for the height, you can see the height also adjusts because of our styling. All right. So this looks nice and you can build upon charts like this. I have added now in the final version, you can see that I have added this nice pie chart as well, just to make things more interactive, make things more colorful. And then we have other sort of published videos widget as well. Now this is loading it through an API call. So you can, through the YouTube data API, so you can use that as well. You can use any other, you can use other services that you're injecting from your app, from your other parts of your app. And then this is just a simple widget, and you can see here we are using the Angular material list component. So you can use any sort of component that you would like based on your own liking. Okay. So the rest of these widgets that you can see here, you can find in the final code that I have on my Buy Me a Coffee shop, and you will find the link to that in the description below. Now, any support that you do on my BMC Buy Me a Coffee page is much appreciated, and it's going to allow me to continue along this content creation journey and create more such useful tutorials for Angular developers. So thanks for watching, and I hope you liked this series of videos on creating a customizable dashboard. Now this is just a start and you can build upon this further. And as with all of my tutorials, I use all of the latest Angular 18 features so that we can also learn together those latest features, because Angular has changed a lot recently. Okay. And as always, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now this helps in getting more engagement for the video and spreading this video on YouTube so that it can get a bigger audience. And I'll see you next time with another set of interesting videos and tutorials.